Good evening, the Wilton School District Board meeting Wednesday, June 13th, 5:30 p.m. in the Junior Senior Media Center. The mission of the Wilton Community School District is to provide an education that encourages continual progress through the improvement of one's abilities, the expansion of one's interests and knowledge, and the growth of one's character. Roll call, please. Miss Stacy.
Linda Duncan.
Here.
Tony Hurd.
Yep.
Sarah Owen.
Here.
Gary Mauer.
Here.
Rob Metzger.
Thank you. Agenda approval. Any additions, changes, or corrections, Mr. Burnett?
None.
Yay. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
A motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we'll do the minutes approval. We have one. Regular meeting, May 14th.
Move to approve the May 14th regular board.
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I see no public forum, correct?
That's
So let's move right on. Stacy, business financial functions.
Yeah, I got it.
We're on record pace, don't slow us down.
What are you doing over there?
I'm taking notes.
Do we need to come back?
Oh, that's right, she's taking notes.
She's taking notes.
Um,
That's fine. I'm just turning it over to you. You may, when it's at your convenience, proceed.
All right. Number 3, taxation funds. Through May. I don't really have anything unusual to mention. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Pretty much on track with all the funds. No questions or comments. That's the taxation fund financials through May 31st. Report number 4 is instructional support, and it has the revenues at the top, our budget in the middle of the page, expenditures to date at the bottom of the page, and what we have left at the end of May. And we will be spending some of that tonight, and then we'll have our meeting next week, and that will get zeroed out. So, any questions or comments about ISP? Number 5, self-insurance. Our self-insurance fund continues to do well for us, and fund breakdown is at the bottom with medical, dental, and vision. And receipts and expenditures at the top. Any questions or comments? All the revenues for the medical services are still sitting in the general fund. Those will get paid this month after I get all the payrolls done. Number 6 is the latchkey report, and the before and after program going from April to May. Lost a few kids, but still doing very well, and revenue and expenditures is still a good exchange. So we've gone from a little under $20,000 at the beginning of this fiscal year to $46,000 at the end of May. So the program there has definitely turned around.
That's how we like it.
Any questions or comments? Number 7 is the period vendor report for latchkey for the month of May, which is anything that's not payroll, so it's just the insurance payment, and the latchkey snacks supplies for the month. Number 8, nutrition fund for the month of May, with the school year usage for lunch and breakfast on the first page for the month of May, and then school year to date. So breakfast was served 172 days, and no lunch the last day of school, so 171. And then the financials, the bottom, of course, that balance has grown greatly also, but this month they'll be paying 3 months of payroll. We pay off July and August contract payments on June 29th. So there'll be a chunk of that eaten up. Any questions or comments? Number 9 is the vendor report for the month of May for nutrition fund. activity fund. Elementary vocal is in the hole due to supervision that is required by the staff for the night concerts. So before the end of June, Joy will do a transfer from vocal junior, senior high to elementary to zero that out. So it stays within the same music category. Negative also is the FFA account. But already in this month of June, they received a $1,250 FFA grant that will barely zero out that negative amount, but for the, by the end of June, that should be out of the red. Fall canteen. I just looked that up to find out why we had an expenditure in there and why it was negative, and it was for a refrigerator repair. I'm thinking that should have come out of the spring canteen, which has already been zeroed out. So Joy and I will have to talk about that when she gets back from vacation and figure out where we're going to zero that out from for the end of the month, because that can't be negative. And then summer canteen, that's negative at the end of May because that canteen was just starting, and there's a vast array of food items in that summer canteen, and so they spent a lot of money at Sprouts and the food vendors to get stuff ready to go for the month of May and into June. So $9,000 were the expenditures. So that will be in the black by the end of this month. So those were the negatives there. But overall, of course, our student activity fund over $200,000 in good shape. FFA enterprise fund. So hogs and sheep are in the negative at the end of May, and so whatever they are in the negative at the end of June, the farm account will have to cover that. That's how that works out, and no other negative accounts to explain. So any questions about any of the activity, FFA enterprise, flex spending, or agency fund accounts? The next report are all of the vendor descriptions and payments for the month of May for the respective funds we just reviewed. Any questions or comments on any of those? Okay, number 12, co-curricular driving for the May, June pay period. So we've got the end of track and then baseball, softball ramping up there, and the end of the school year classroom trips. Any questions or comments? Number 13 is the payroll expenses. Anything not in a contract that's submitted in our office for payment is put on this list before paid. So we got all the regulars and then a few end of the year extras. Any questions or comments? And number 14 starts the board bill report. Lots of general fund bills this time. I think it goes through like page 8. And page 10 is an additional bill from West Liberty for fund number 10 that I added on for $18.90. They billed us incorrectly for the TLC, and so we had to add another $18.90 onto their check. So we have over $200,000 for general fund bills this time, and then we had to initiate a builder's risk insurance policy for the boiler project, and that is the $43 is only for the month of June, so there'll be a new policy starting July 1st. And then our last invoice for the bond construction account, $650 for the ending the speaker project the elementary, and that account will be zeroed out. And then we have several bills for the 1 cent sales tax, 133, and then the revenue bond payments are due on July 1st, so they come out of this year's budget in June. So any questions on any bills from any of those funds?
I make a motion to pay the bills.
A second?
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Okay.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
We had Mr. Meyer, invited him to come back, go over some stuff with the board as far as some scores, and also to go over, remember the board goals we put together last fall?
Yes.
Where we had our different levels and have him go over some of that tonight.
Which one's listed first? I don't have a copy of that.
No, Denise is first, actually.
Well, but in my section, fast
I'm
scores,
going to your
Ed
section.
Insight?
Are you at Insight?
Ed Insight, perfect.
Yes, page.
The fancy blue ones.
Mm-hmm.
Page
So
22?
the Ed Insight reports
Okay, yep.
are, basically this kind of deals with our equity piece. The old site visits that they used to take part in the state. We talked about equity, and Mr. Burnett's our equity coordinator. And some of this gets into looking at your attendance center stuff. The thing that I pull out of a report like this when I look at this is the positive that we have in Wilton from our open enrollments. When you see that they're on that first page, it's mine that says page 3, but I'm assuming that's your first page, where we have a plus 23 students into Wilton. That come in, that we always have more, seems like, coming in than going out, which has been kind of a consistent trend, I think, for our district. I think that speaks well for the offerings that we have here when we talk about classes a little bit later. The other thing that I would like to point out on a page like that is when you look at that second page, so my page 4, it actually shows you where those kids are going. We've got students, that open enrollment out to Bennett and Davenport, Durant, Eliza, Muscatine, various communities that are around us. From that. The other thing that I would talk about on there is our special education enrollment as far as a district. Usually the state would tell you that 10% is kind of your ceiling. You don't want more than 10% of your student population to be in that, and we're currently at 7.8%. So I think we're managing well. Our students, we've got some, I don't want to say alternatives, that's the wrong way to say that, but I think we've got enough safeguards in play to offer different pathways for students to make sure they're doing well. School-wise. Special education is not always the answer for every child. And I think the elementary does a good job with that with their MTSS process, and the high school does a nice job with that with their improvement intervention from that. So, what's the next one? Program evaluations. All right, perfectly. So, pretty light year actually for program evaluations. Every year we have to do our professional development. The elementary, probably for the last, 5 or 6 years for sure, has used the data team format on their Wednesday mornings. They have there's a protocol that they go through, there are 6 steps through that. And Mrs. Austin and I kind of feel like that's kind of cemented itself, that we won't need to continue to monitor that moving forward. So some of our PED programming will change next year. We'll still use elements of that, but it will change from the scope of what they're doing. We won't be asking them to necessarily follow this format. We believe it's ingrained enough, to be quite honest with you, from that. And that's kind of the funny thing, I think, with PD is, we have professional development. The intent is for that not to go away the next year, and we don't do that. That's to become ingrained in that. We've utilized this format, I believe, long enough to do that. And it's had great success for us. When you look on the top part of that page there, when you see our Iowa assessment scores, where they've come to, when you look at our FAST scores, which we'll look here in a moment, it has had an impact. And I've said this 100 times, It's never gonna make us all perfect in the end. It's just, we continue to run the race, we continue to make a little bit of improvement along the way. That's what we want in the end of the day, is to continue to get better and better and better with that. So when you look at your indicators of performance there, 3 out of the 4 grade levels did have higher scores in their reading and math, which is exactly what we want with that. The high school used a little bit of a different format. We used one of Doug Fisher's work, the intentional and targeted teaching, which had components about purposeful planning and how you do long-term planning, short-term planning, how you do assessment. So it was kind of a nice tie-in for, I think, the work we're gonna do with AIW, to be quite honest. It laid some nice framework for that. And again, you see the scores, across those 3 spans there, continue to make progress with that. And then when you look at the staff's response to their survey and the 10 critical areas that we did, you see there's growth in all of those areas. So from that pre-assessment to post-assessment, the work that we did during our PD time is having impacts with that. The area that we probably struggle the most with, and I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing for us, is when you look at our mentoring and inductions over 3 years, and we tracked tracked teachers back to 2013 and 14 to see where those teachers are, if they're still within our district, where they're at. We've had people move on, different career options have come up, people have gotten married, they go on to different places. But our goal is always to have the teachers, we want at least to have 65% of those staff here after 3 years. And we feel like we invest that time with that, and we just barely got above that. We were 67% over that last 3 period. We had 12 out of the 18. But the ones that leave, I feel good about they're not leaving the profession. They're leaving for alternatives. Samantha Van Sloten, husband got a new job, moving on to a different educational job. Katie Dunlop, seeing someone else, moved on to a different educational job. The people that I look on the list from there, 2013 to 14, the only one that I don't know personally that is teaching was one of them that filled in for Nicole Miller. The Rays was the last name. Everybody else on there that has left our district, I believe, has left our district for an educational reason. They're doing education somewhere else. So I feel good about that from that standpoint. We did revamp our mentoring program about 3 years ago, and we've kind of evolved it again with our TLC. We've kind of morphed into that a little bit. We used to pair people up one-to-one individually. That was their go-to person. They went through their 10 lessons through the first year, and then they had 6 that second year. We've kind of done that from a kind of a group perspective now. From that, I get involved with certain lessons, which wasn't done before. So, you lose a little bit of that individualistic side to that. You knew who your person was to go to. But I think we've broadened that scope of brought more people into the plate, I think, a little bit more for them. Title I, that parent involvement, that's a yearly one. We have to do that every year. And our Title I program has changed a little bit at the elementary with the I-block that's gone on. They're a lot more involved with I-block, so they don't have, I believe, all that extra time to meet with all those kids that you used to always have going on. But I think that's been a good thing because we've got that expertise now out in groups doing work. She had 31 students involved, K1, 2, and 3, bigger contingent at first grade than other grade levels, and had 5 kids that exited the program this year. So good things continue to happen, I believe, with our Title I. Very sad, Susie Shirk retiring, but I'm extremely excited with Katie Meyer coming in. She brings a wealth of knowledge. She taught at Adele, I believe, was in year 4. A school that's very well known for their reading aggressiveness, I believe, in their building. So I'm pretty excited to have her join us there. Is FAST next? Mm-hmm. Perfect. What you see there at the top part of the page is our 3 snapshots over the year. And I have to emphasize that to you enough, that the kindergarten scores to the 6th grade scores are individually done. The teacher sits down with that kid. It's that snapshot at that moment. They read 3 passages, 2nd grade through 3rd grade, and it takes the middle score. Doesn't average them out, it just takes the middle score. So low score, high score, middle score, that becomes their score that they get. The greens on there mean that we've met the state benchmark of 80%. And that becomes an important cutoff line because then that tells you that your core instruction in class is acceptable, that it's meeting enough of those kids' needs in the classroom. If it's below 80%, then supposedly your core needs some work done, When you're above 80%, then you can start looking at how you're working with small groups. Our iBlock has been tremendous in this process because we're already doing that process. When you look at the bottom of the page there, when you look at those 4-year scores over that time, and you look at now, what draws my eye the most is that 3rd through 6th grade. When you look at those numbers in 2014 to 15 to where they are in 17, 18, that iBlock trend, I think, is starting to kick in. Those kids are retaining more information. They keep getting, you know, I don't want to say bludgeoned with it, but kind of. They keep getting hit with it over and over and over again with that. Now, the caveat to this is just reading speed. That comprehension piece is that challenging part of this in the classrooms with the teachers. You know, and that's ultimately why you read. You know, it's not to read fast, it's to understand what you're reading. Research will tell you, however, if a child can read fast enough, that they usually comprehend well, because then the language starts to sound like you're talking, and you have an easier time with that when you do that. If you read really slow and really choppy, you spend more time worrying about the words than you do about the words and how they fit together with that. So our fast scores have been phenomenal all 4 years. I would say we probably are in the top 20% usually across the state. And it's gotten a little bit harder the way they changed the system. I can't go snoop like I used to be able to at other people's scores. And I can't even give you state averages from our last ones because they haven't been compiled yet. The old system kicked them out just like that. So sometime in August, I'll have numbers for you about where we're at state average-wise, and then where our AE average is at. If you were at SIAC, then you get to see, we typically are above the state and the AE average, so we do very well in that category. Class things next.
Yep.
So this is from Mr. Patterson. This is all the classes we offer here in Wilton. 7th through 12th grade. And we look at this a little bit from the standpoint of that female and male. You know, the ideal would be to have a 50-50 split in every class. You know, construction and foods and all of those, that we'd have that 50-50 split, that we've got boys that are taking classes that are, you know, historically a female gender, and vice versa with the girls taking that. And there are some of those in here, you know, that, you know, we've got more boys in there than girls, but there are a couple classes. When I look at that pre-calculus class, we've got a lot more females in there than we do males in there. So we've got some of those females that are sticking with math longer, you know, not just getting their requirements done, they're actually sticking with it. Foods class, we actually have more males in the foods classes than we do the females this coming year. So, you know, you're gonna see that, I think, throughout the same thing with journalism. There's more boys actually in journalism this next year than there are girls in there. So some of those historical classes that always kind of fit one way or the other, I think we're losing that a little bit. Elizabeth LaFollette teaching math at the high school, I think is a huge win, because you've got a female teaching some of those upper level classes. She's actually teaching one of the MCC classes, the stats class. You know, so you've got a female, you know, in that area that does that. So I know Tim Bean does a lot of recruiting for his computer classes that he does with the girls, and he's gotten more girls. I know it's not where he'd like it at. I know he'd love to see a 50-50 split, but I know he's not at that level yet. Carpentry and woods have historically been harder classes for the girls to kind of buy into. Do that. We do have some girls that do that over time. But it's been a little bit of a harder class for us. Animal science, we actually have more females doing that than males. So, I mean, we can go through here and cherry pick any class that you want and look at it like that. But we do have instances where I think we have girls that are taking classes more than the boys in a historically opposite way. So I think that's always a good thing for our district. And it's just amazing to me when you look through that, how many options kids have. When you look at that MCC page, that's almost the whole page itself. You know, that kids have those opportunities to do that. So. The last thing I believe I have is the district long-range goal page. So if you remember back in September, October, I think, Mrs. Austin and myself and Mr. Snavely sat down and started compiling all these things that we just kind of had going on and kind of fit them under our long-range goals for the district. You know, and our first 3 fit more academically. All K-12 kids are going to, you know, achieve at higher levels in reading, math, and science. And we have that technology piece in there, and then that safe in school. And then the color coding is just to kind of put it in that building perspective, maybe a little bit more. The blue being more an elementary emphasis, the black being a little bit more of the high school emphasis. And then the letters after it are kind of where I believe where we're sitting at as a district. And that code for that is on that second page there. When you see that PDAR, plan, do, analyze, and revise. And the great news is, I think we're getting to see a lot more things that we're getting in that analyze and revise stage where we're at than more in the planning. Some of the planning things that you'll see on here are years out when we look at like science curriculum in 2025 again. Or if we look at math curriculum in 2024. So some of those things that are out there. Our I-block and our FAST, we're in that analyzing and revising stage as to how can we make those systems better for our kids? How can we utilize our staff more effectively and do that? At the high school level, the reading labs that we've looked at, that Mr. Kroger does, or the Language Arts 9 that we do, from that kind of stuff, we've kind of moved away from that planning and the doing, more in that analyzing. Are they still effective with kids? Are we still getting kids to meet targets and goals? And yes, we are continuing to do that. When you look down the page a little bit farther, the Iowa Core teachers, all of our teachers K-12 have been trained through the Iowa Core science standards. Social studies, we've got the high school, actually 5th through 12th is all done with that. Not this summer, but next summer, all of the K-4 will go through that. So I don't want to bore you and read all of this kind of stuff on here with that. The one element that is missing on here, and I was just talking to Mr. Snavely about this, we got to get this on here, is we need to get AIW on here now. And that's become a huge initiative at the high school. And we've visited several schools, and we'll start rolling that out with pilot teams next year. But it's probably a 4, 5, 6, 7 year process, that we're going to go through to I think fully implement this and do this well. That'll smatter itself on here because it's not just a reading thing, or it's not just a science thing, or it's not just a math thing. It has its generalities in all of those areas. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let you ask me any questions that you have about that page. And DA does not stand for Denise Austin on there.
No, it's a lot of information, and I know it can be tedious and tough to go through. But I will say this, our FAST scores are something really to be proud of, number one. The program evaluations, I'm always impressed with the things we're doing with our particular programs. And number 3, what the board asked for last fall, I think will always be in flux and flexible each year. We'll look at it in the fall and then again at the spring and just roll.
I think it's nice to see that though, to see how things, a long-term, short-term, where everything falls in.
For me, it'll be fun to look back and look at this piece of paper 5 years from now. That'll be interesting too, because then you can see where you started and where you went.
And several of those letters have changed since the fall when we first did this. We were in several of those P and D kind of letters, or PDAR, kind of just depending on where we were at with that. And we've moved a lot more of them to the BA and the LRA level of that, that we're in that analyzing and revising stage. And some of these will probably never go off here because I think they'll always be in that analyzing, revising stage, wherever you're at, academically. So,
Cool.
questions about anything?
Good work, Mr. Meyer.
Yes,
Seriously,
thank you.
excellent.
Very,
Thank you.
yes. So if no comments or questions from Mr. Meyer, thank you very much.
You betcha.
And we will get back to Mrs. Austin. Yes, please, thank you.
I will start on my handbook page. There were really no major changes. Attendance, and actually you can probably see it visually better on mine. The attendance and tardy, we just cleaned it up because, we had, you're gonna do this at 5, we're gonna do this at 7, we're gonna do this at 12. And we kind of have meshed that in with our Leader in Me and Restorative Justice piece. Instead of having children staying at recess because they're tardy, we were bringing parents in and trying to talk to them about how important it is to be at school. So the change in the handbook just simply reflect that change in our kind of attitude and policies. What do I have right on this page? Oh, that's still attendance. Then on soliciting on school property, we just named like applied economics products. They come down and sell their stuff to the kids as part of what they do. So we just simply listed them in there. We kind of simplified the flower and balloon deliveries. Breakfast, we're letting them come in 5 minutes earlier so they aren't late. Summer programming available for latchkey, we added. Drills, we added lockdown to drills. everything else, oh, PBIS, we took out that whole section because no longer do we do PBIS. This is our kind of last year of transition into the Leader in Me, so we made a similar rubric specifying what it would look like in each of the common spaces of the elementary. And this will be a little bit in flux, because we'll be doing some changing to that this year. And actually, I believe that is it except for dates. On the back, the grade report dates when they're due. And then, oh, we have, no, I misspoke. Visitors, I just put in the buzz-in procedure that they have, and the volunteers have to also buzz in. So, nothing major. The biggest thing really is that alignment with restorative justice and Leader in Me. 13 students, does anybody have any questions on the handbook? Sorry. We recognize 13 students for attendance. We differentiate between outstanding attendance and perfect. Perfect means they weren't late or left early at all. And specialties gives us t-shirts for our perfects. So that's always, they really enjoy that. They shoot for that. That's kind of a fun thing. Lexia, as Mr. Meyer talked a lot about iBlock, the other thing that is really expensive, and that's why we're looking at it, because it is really expensive. And we truly only use it K-3 now, because the rest of our children have gotten through the levels, is Lexia. And the kids, it's a software program, and they log in, and it levels them. And then if they miss too many, it backs them up, and then a little apple appears, and the teacher is to reteach a lesson. And so they use this a lot in small groups. Our data really supports that it has made a difference. If you simply look at the top line, the blue is who was on level. At the beginning of the year, it was 42%. And then at the end of the year, it was either on level, and then 5 or above. So if you add those two together, it's 47% were blue. So where you want to be at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, we had 94%. So it really is kind of a small group. This is the time when those teachers are able to pull back kids that they need to work one-on-one with, and then the kids can go to town on this. And it is very individualized. On the back of it, we were hoping to see a pattern in usage to see if this told us anything, and it really doesn't, except that we went on spring break and Christmas break.
I was gonna say.
Other than that, it's very consistent usage with it as well. Because
Teeth.
what I was trying to look at is if our lower percentage of classes still had a high percentage of the movement. And they don't. I mean, the more you use it, the more you move. So it does, it kind of speaks to, it has served its purpose for us, along with iBlock. So that's just kind of a wrap up on that one. Summer Academy, 56 kids, K-3, we only do it K-3, we're invited. And at this point, we've had 49 confirmations, which is way higher percentage than we ever get. So, you know, that's really a tribute to the community and the teachers who are willing to teach it. We're gonna split up first grade, because if you saw Mr. Meyer's, first grade does seem to be a little bit lower than the rest of them. So we have quite a few kids, because that's how we put them in summer schools, based on the class scores. So we're gonna kind of give them a little bit more individual attention, so we have one more teacher to summer school. We'll have 5 this year. And we don't do that till the last week of July and the first 2 weeks of August. And we only focus on reading during summer school. And then Leader in Me on the last full day of last day of school for teachers. We had a full PD day, and our Leader in Me representative, Kim Nelson, came out. And it's all about school culture now. That's kind of where we are. And environment will be a big part of it in this coming year. So we've kind of had some, reached out to people to do some sketching for us, and we're trying to figure out how we can, got some paint colors that are supposed to bring out calm and intelligence in people.
Clara Debbie?
Well,
Yeah.
I've got a whole palette, I've got like 12 of them.
Oh.
Ankeny had done a lot of work, and so Kim had shared the research and then the color palette with us. So we decided to do the work ourselves. We will just, it's not your purple. It's not on there, sorry.
Oh.
Do you have purple in your office?
No, it's like a wine color.
And then the last thing really, truly I want to do is kind of give a shout out to our teachers. It's kind of funny, June's obviously much slower in the buildings, but there have been teachers crawling everywhere because they're doing the book study.
Yeah.
All the elementary teachers are doing math. a big math course, they're all of them are taking it. So they're in here because some of their bandwidth at home isn't as quick as ours is. And then they meet as groups, a lot of them are collaborating to do it together.
The Twitter's blowing up with a whole bunch of
That was
stuff.
fun.
Yeah.
That's what I told them, you guys can tell you
Yeah.
have to do that, you have to post something for class. But it's,
Cool.
it is still very, very impressive. And we have them going to Scholastic, reading conference and to KPAC and Dubuque. The beginning of next week and the end of next week. So it's kind of great, I mean, it's just, it really shows when they spend their summer at learning.
Good.
I mean, I think that's also why we're getting a lot of improvements that we're making. So.
It's kind of cool. One of the books we read administratively is called How Children Succeed by a fellow named Paul Tuff, which I think is kind of funny. I don't know if that's his real name, Mr. Tuff. But it's a really good book about, you know, helping kids to be successful. It talks about grit and just talks about, you know, different areas outside the classroom that help kids to be successful. How many teachers do we have sign up to do this? There's quite a few, and it's teams of 4.
Probably 35?
Yeah, 35. And that's over half our
Great.
staff.
Great groups.
And we're using some of our TQ funding, pay them to be part of this book study, and they just kind of like mirror what we do. They meet 4 times. The book has 6 chapters. It's not super long, and they get together. Some of them meet in here. They met Mr. Snave's office of the group. We've got a couple teachers that are out of town, so they, you know, go in on FaceTime and they have that study, and it's just really,
Great.
I think, been a positive. Yeah. So, what do you think of the book, Mr. Snavely? You weren't here to read
I've
it.
only read chapter 1 because we just met this morning for the first time, so we took us about 45 minutes to have that discussion this morning. It was good.
What was the main point of the chapter 1?
Chapter 1 was a lot about like the family dynamics and why kids end up where they are, and they talked about, you know, that first couple of years of life, and it was more from a parent standpoint than from the teacher standpoint about like what can we as educators do, but I think they're eventually going to go there, you know, things like that. But it's all about the attachment and the trauma that kids have in their lives, and they talked about the ACEs study a little bit and those types of things. So I'm only in chapter 1, but that's really what they got into first chapter. So.
Yeah, there's just so many variables at play to a student's success that aren't necessarily in our control, but if we can understand what those triggers are,
Yeah.
we can try to work with the students a little bit better, and not just assume, why aren't you listening? You know, or why aren't you doing this? Because not everyone has the same K-5, or excuse me, you know, from age 0 to age 5 experience. Plays into it.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Austin. Mr. Snavely?
All right. Well, I'll start with my junior, senior high board report. At the end of the year, it was just kind of a whirlwind with everything going on, and so I kind of capitalized on some of the field trips that we did, and you know, with the reading program, the book buddies program, going to game, and the Adventureland trip with band, and those types of things. So that's that first paragraph. The CTE advisory meeting, I talked a little bit about how we were going to have that. We had that on May 18th, 7:15 right here, and I thought we'd maybe have 2 or 3 parents come, and I don't know, remember, I had the agenda and everything in my office, but would we have 15, 20?
Yeah, it's
It
excellent.
was a great community support, and kids came to it, and junior, senior high kids, and they gave their feedback as well, so that was really good. So we'll continue that. The day after school was out, we wrote the Perkins grant for next year. So Mr. Bruns and Mr. Kelly and myself and Mr. Meyer sat down and did that, so that's submitted. And then I capitalized a little bit on senior awards night and the junior high awards and high school awards, and that all went without a hitch. Summer school, we weren't gonna offer summer school at first, and we found out we had some at-risk dollars that we had the opportunity to spend. So we are offering summer school, basically for, all students. We opened it up to all students. Mrs. Hessler, Mr. Bean, Mr. Putman are teaching. We're doing 2 sessions from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, and basically for 3 weeks. So they're going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we're about halfway through that. We have 20 students signed up, so really it was open to everybody. And I even had some parents email me this week saying, I was on vacation, can we send them? Yep, if you want that extra support, send them. So that's been a positive. And then basically I kind of bid farewell to our teachers in the last paragraph. It was kind of hard, you know, for those teachers that are retiring, at least the two that I have in my building, just, you know, turning in their keys and things like that. It's a hard thing to do after all those years, but we thank them for their dedication and all their work that they put into the district, and wish them well in retirement, so. Any questions about the junior, senior high board report? Okay. Athletic-wise, or activity-wise, I listed the state track qualifiers for both boys and girls. I highlighted golf. As far as their seasons went, the boys won the River Valley Conference meet in sectionals out at Wakanza. The girls placed second in the conference. So very positive golf seasons as well as track seasons. Baseball and softball are off to a great start. They're actually playing tonight. At least the boys are, and the JV girls are out playing out there tonight. Boys are ranked number 1 until they lost to Regina. So I think right now they're like 12-2, I think, and the girls they were 7-5 when I wrote this board report, and I listed kind of the records of the teams. So all of our teams are off to a really good start. We had a few hiccups early on with some technology. Luckily, we checked that well in advance to make sure everything was working. When we moved the sound system from the football press box to the baseball, we had it working perfect one Saturday morning, and then first game came along, and Tom Bonesock was up there trying to try it out for one of our JV games, and it wouldn't work. So we spent another 5 or 6 hours trying to figure out what was loose in the back, and we found a ground wire that was loose, and we got that fixed. So luckily that wasn't anything major, but it was kind of a headache trying to get it all going. We also had an issue with our baseball scoreboard. We had to put a new sensor in that after buying a new score controller last year. So I went out there the first time, thought, okay, after getting this new controller, it's all gonna work great. Nothing. So luckily, we checked that like 3 weeks before the season, so we got that up and running, so that's smoothed out. And then in the softball field, we had the sound system going fine, and all of a sudden the speakers blew out. So that sound system, first it was sound system, second was speakers. So we ordered a whole new system for the softball field. You can see if you go to a softball game, the speakers are inside the press box right now. And I think it's July 11th they're going to mount those outside. So it kind of blows you out when you're standing up there. But it's a beautiful system, works great. And once we get those mounted, we'll have everything back working really, really well again. So last thing I want to mention, lots of stuff going on this summer. We did hire Kevin Welch to come in. He's worked with Davenport, Assumption, and Durant on some personal training, agility type things. So the boosters did agree to spend $2,000 on him to bring him in for several. It's like a 6-week program, and we charge the kids a small amount of money to do that as well. And he's been here, I think it's 7 o'clock in the morning in the junior high gym. So there's been a lot of kids. I think on a given day there's between 30 and 40 students doing that. So that's been positive. I've heard a lot of positive comments from students as well as coaches as far as that goes. So I'm just working to kind of, make us better, I guess. So that's really it. We're in the heat of baseball and softball and things like that. So anything with athletics?
Yeah, go over handbook changes.
Okay, my handbook, there's not a ton of changes, but there are a few. What I did was when I sent it to Joy to upload to you, I've made all the changes in red. So I hope that's easy for you to follow that way. So I'm just going to go through those really quick. It won't take me too long. On page 6, PSEO classes are no longer, and we can talk about post-secondary enrollment opportunities for our students, but the actual PSEO is no longer. We have concurrent enrollment classes now. So whereas the students will be responsible for costs exceeding $250, we can't charge that anymore because we don't have PSEO. So I just strike that out. And then I added in some verbiage from the MCC manual. You can see where it's called College Connections. I didn't get into all the senior year plus stuff like was in their handbook because I didn't want to confuse everybody, but I did add some of the verbiage about the consortium with the community colleges and some of the programs and courses that we offer and some of the benefits. And if you have kids that have graduated from here, you know what the benefits are, but if you're a parent just sending your student into high school, you don't really understand that whole process until you kind of go through it. So I did add some stuff in there just to kind of give a little bit of an idea of what this all means. So that was on page 5 and 6. If you fast forward to page, as I'm flipping, 13, where we have tardies, okay? I just added a couple sentences there, and what I added was a student may be required to serve detention with 5 unexcused tardies per semester. The detention could be in the form of before or after school or lunch detention. Right now, we do a really good job of following up on attendance every day, and we do a really good job of following through on truancy. But those frequent flyers that come in on A and B days at 8:30, it's a handful of students, but you know, we don't really follow through a whole lot. There are students eventually, after I see them in the window X number of times, I'm like, okay, you're late tomorrow, you're going to lunch detention, and you're going to lunch detention every time until then. And that usually kind of curbs that, but we didn't really have anything in our handbook for that. So Mr. Dutchaver and I, we sat down and revised this, and we said that that's one of the things we really want to focus on for next year's. You know, we feel like we have truancy in a good place, but what can we do differently with the tardies to try to, you know, get kids in school right away in the morning to start the day. So we added that. Fast forwarding ahead to page 18, we just added a blurb about cell phones when they're in detention and in school suspension. Basically, they're not allowed to have access to their cell phones. We don't allow that right now, but I'll be honest with you, we've had a couple students that say, well, it's not in the handbook that we can't have cell phones. It is now, so we'll be able to actually reference that. So, not that we haven't been doing that, but it's just something that have in writing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm shocked they looked, yeah. They
That's what they do.
perused and tried to see, well.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Sent
they
it there,
do.
but still, yeah.
On page 22, I added a section about skateboards and scooters, and that's really about football games. We have some students that bring skateboards and scooters, and A, they carry them around, or 2, they ride them around, and it's dangerous. It's dark in some of those areas, so we're just not gonna let them be used on school property. If they can still ride them to school and store them in their locker, we don't have a problem with that, but they're not gonna be able to be carried around to school-sponsored events. And we had them bring them into the gym a few times as well. So just tightening that up a little bit, and we go over all these changes with the students on the first couple days of school, so they'll learn about this right away, so it won't be an issue. On page 23, we did this year as well. We did not let students go to their vehicle during the school day without an escort from an adult. So we walked them down to the door, not necessarily always out to their car, but we at least stayed by the door and made sure that they weren't doing anything they shouldn't be doing. So we added that in the handbook as well to kind of follow through on that. On page 23 as well, pop and candy. We've had a little bit of an issue in the cafeteria. And with the Healthy Kids Act, you can't have pop, okay? But you can have a drink, what we call Monster. It's legal. It's legal to have in the cafeteria under the Healthy Kids Act, okay? I don't understand.
Caffeine, right?
Yeah, and that's wrong.
So I don't understand why that is. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put it in the handbook that it's no carbonated or caffeinated, and it's just gonna take care of that.
Yep.
So, you know, then we don't have questions, because we had some arguments about it, and of course, we go ask Mrs. Dinkman, and she's like, yeah, Monster's fine, and we're like, well, that doesn't make sense to us, so, anyway, we're just gonna end that and make sure that it's fair, so. School purchases was updated just to reflect our online requisitions that we now have. In the past, that said something about filling out a paper in the principal's office and taking it to central office, and now it's all online, so I just updated that to reflect how we do things now. Okay, on page 25 under cafeteria rules, we added the no carbonated or caffeinated beverage during lunch, again, so it's in 2 places. And again, you'll be approving these changes, so that's why I want to highlight these to you guys, so you're in the loop on those. Moving ahead, on page 31, under, it said freshman eligibility, I just put the word academic in there. It's not really just eligibility, it's the academic eligibility. So I did that on page 31 and 32 for that. And then on page 33, I added academic eligibility again, and that is where I added in that junior high policy. If you remember in the fall, I brought you that sheet of paper that I said I was gonna send over to parents, and we were gonna mimic basically what we did at our high school. And we started that right away in the fall, and it worked perfectly. It got students to kind of understand that there are some ramifications for not getting your work done in failing classes, and you are gonna be ineligible, and they were. And so we really didn't have any issues with that at all. So that policy is now updated in there. And I think that's it. So nothing really major, just kind of some minor things to just clean things up a little bit. The handbook is very well written. It's not, you know, some handbooks I've seen are 80, 90 pages long. It's pretty short, to the point, and direct, so there wasn't a whole lot to really change with it. Questions about any of those changes?
Good job.
Very good.
Thank you.
Guidance program mission,
Oh, by the way, I also.
Yeah, what about the,
guidance program mission statement.
I
Oh, and that one's
I added
good.
our schedules in there, just in
Oh,
case
okay.
they wanted
Oh.
to know,
Okay.
as well as our course descriptions.
Oh,
okay,
it's
that's
good.
what that is.
I don't know, I'm just used to adding that in there just as communication to the board, so.
Okay,
No changes really necessarily, well, there are changes, but just more of a communication piece.
gotcha.
Sweet. Thank you. All right. Now we are to consent agenda number 1.
Should be able to roll. Letter A is just our personnel changes, and just one, Haley Teague is step Red's coach. Since she's no longer in the social worker position, she didn't include that in her letter, so
Yeah.
it was both.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's it.
Motion to approve consent agenda number 1.
Second.
Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Consent agenda number 2.
Just a couple small suggestions on two policies, 411.5 and 411.6. I know it's minor, but I don't know, it's what you pay me to do, look for the details.
Yep.
On 411.5, just talks about classified employee assignment. We're talking about anyone that's not a teacher. Okay, licensure piece.
Oh.
It says the assignment of each classified employee is the responsibility of the superintendent within the sole discretion of the board. If we have an associate that goes from student A to a different spot, that doesn't come from the board. All the assignments are made by the administration.
Yes.
So that'd be my recommendation, just to say, determine the assignment of each classified employee is a responsibility of the administration and or department head.
Well, I was gonna say.
Because that could include Terry moving people around in her kitchen, or, you know, maybe
Yeah.
Joe taking a night custodian to a day shift.
Mhm.
That doesn't come from the board.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that'd be my recommendation, responsibility of the administration and or department heads. Are you okay with that?
Mhm.
And strike the and within the sole discretion of the board.
Right.
And then you change the next sentence, or
The
you
next
just leave it?
sentence.
In the making,
Superintendent to assign.
I mean, change that to be the,
superintendent and or department head.
okay.
And I'll sit down with Stacy afterward, and we'll make
Yep.
sure we have the right wording, and this will come in front of the board again
Mhm.
next month, okay? Are you okay with that?
Yes.
That just
Yes.
popped to me, it's like, why?
You go to superintendent.
And that kind of goes into 411.6 as well.
Right.
And just to be forthright, for classified employee transfers, again, if someone wants to apply or move from an elementary associate one-on-one to an I-block person, they don't even put in for a transfer. They just, the principals
Mhm.
put them
Just do it.
there, or they, you know, they may
Right.
ask and request it,
Right.
or that sort of thing. So for me, it really should come down to, again, just adding in there the responsibility of the administration and or department heads where necessary, wherever it includes the board. But you know, that first line, determine the location of where a classified employee's assignment will be performed, the responsibility of the administration and or department heads, period. Strike it. Good night, Noah.
Bye.
In making such assignment sheets, you, the superintendent and/or department head shall consider the qualifications of each classified employee and the needs of the school district. And then a transfer may be initiated by the employee, principal, department head, or superintendent. I would add that. Is that okay? But I will say, that last part too, it's be the responsibility of the superintendent to transfer classified employees and report such transfers to the board. I don't let you know if someone goes from night shift to day shift or child-specific associate to I-block.
No.
No.
Can we strike that last?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I know these are minor and it
No,
hasn't
but
been,
let's-
but why not, I've always said
way
reflect
what we're
what
doing.
reality is. So,
No, looks good, sounds good.
okay, that's it. So we need a motion to approve those with additions and strikes as presented.
No, Tony, you're always good at that.
Huh?
You're always good at that.
Sure. I make it, so moved.
I second that.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
You guys are great.
We
Yeah.
trust you.
I just
Because we'll
pat,
see
I just
it.
pat him from
We'll
now
see it. It's
on.
not
He
like
does
you're
it,
just
we've
doing
got
it.
it.
Well, exactly.
So we will see what you've done and then we'll.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
will see what you.
We
will
might-
see.
we might be
Yeah.
okay.
Are you
Change it.
threatening me,
No, I'm
President
not.
Duncan?
Hey, and here Tony goes, yeah, whatever you said, he didn't even want to repeat it.
Wow.
All right, a
Okay.
little punchy, all right, so consent 3, let's go.
All right, letter A, 18-19 activity fees. Everything's the same except the yearbook, if I'm not mistaken, that's gone up by $5.
Your book isn't on this one, it's on
Oh, I was
administration.
gonna say. I
So we're okay?
see
This one?
that.
That's under okay, so I was
Okay.
lumping A and B
All
together.
right, so A is okay.
No difference in activity fees and registration, the only change is in your book. Everything else is the same from the past. Okay? Are there questions on either of those two?
No.
Your book went from 50 to 55.
Oh, here it is, high school yearbook purchase, all right,
Okay.
55, all right, good, all right.
C and D have already been discussed, the handbooks.
Handbooks, all right.
Letter E is our homeschool assistance agreement that we have with the AEA.
Mhm. Okay,
Letter F is our sharing agreement we have with Mr. Brad Miller with Durant. Continue that.
okay.
And G, H, and I are our second readings from last month where we struck the verbiage dealing with refer to the master contract.
Yes, so those two, okay. Yep,
That's it on our consent agenda 3.
Move to approve consent agenda number 3.
Second.
all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries, all right.
All right, under one individual bid tonight, we discussed in our maintenance committee meeting about tuck pointing the wrestling room, how it needed it pretty badly.
Okay.
We received 2 bids, one from Hoekstra Masonry for $25,144, and then one from TNT Tuck Pointing and Restoration LLC, and that was for $29,100. So with everything being equal, in terms of the scope of the work, it's my recommendation we go with Hoekstra Masonry for $25,144.
Move to approve Oakshire Construction for tuck pointing bid.
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Opposed, motion carries. All right.
Thankfully, I have nothing to report under hirings, because
We're
everybody's in place.
Yay.
Maintenance-wise, things are really cranking up. The old bleachers, the old visitors bleachers in the high school gymnasium are removed. They're going to start painting, I believe, this weekend. They're gonna get the gym painted, then they can put the new bleachers in. A lot of things are gonna take place after July 1st, as you can imagine, because of our fiscal year starting. In terms of work on the track, kudos to our our Roger and Don crew. They're replacing the fencing around the track as well right now. And we're going to be starting on pouring the concrete. The visitors' football bleachers, track bleachers have been removed. And they're going to pour that pad here soon. I know Joe spoke to Jake Postra, they're doing the work. And then the bleachers we put in, there'll be seating for 393 seats, I believe. I just round up to 400. So it'll be pretty good size bleachers over there. It'll be very similar to the home side in terms of size. What else? The boiler project's going full bore. So they're making headway with that. And
Floor downstairs is all out.
yeah, the floor, the asbestos people are in the, I call it the lower commons area by the gymnasium. That's all
Oh,
out.
yes,
That'll be
good.
poured here in July, I believe.
Sweet.
Should, I don't know if it'll be the end of this month, but it'll
It's
be.
gonna be this month.
Is it?
I just talked to you, yeah.
Okay. I thought it was, but I wasn't 100%. So,
School doors and lights.
yeah, we're replacing the high school doors down here.
Oh,
And then you
that's
saw the
right.
stenciling, I'll call
All
it
the
stenciling.
new
That'll, graphics that'll be put on.
Sweet.
We ordered a new sign that's gonna match the elementary, that's like Wilton Junior Senior High.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
the lights
Yeah.
will be replaced, one of them's not working, so they're gonna put LEDs up there.
Doing the same thing here at this store.
Good.
So there's just a
Yes.
ton that's going on this summer, and it's exciting to see it being done.
How about the gazebo, or the,
Outdoor classroom?
yeah, outdoor classroom?
Yeah.
I don't know where Dave Morris is at with that. Did they finally get it
It's
ordered?
scheduled to be delivered like July 16th, I think. It was, mid-July, so, yeah, Dave was taking care of, talking to Jake Hoekstra about getting the cement in place before that.
Before I came in.
Yeah. So, I had some conversation with Joe, Gary, based upon our conversations about the area by the retention pond and that stuff, so getting that looked at as well. So, it's been a really productive summer. We've been out of school 3 weeks. You
You're
know,
doing
and so there's
it,
been
yeah.
a lot of stuff being torn out downstairs. Justin and Bo, we're replacing all the ceiling tile by the old cafeteria, the locker rooms,
Oh,
and
good.
going back. And so while they're getting all that replaced, they're also making sure the wires are, you know, where they need to be and whatnot, because everything's down.
Yes.
So that'll look
Perfect
nice
time.
too, just
Yeah.
having all that retiled
Mhm.
down through there.
Right.
Nice.
So a lot of, you think about, that's a lot of improvements.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mr. Snavely, he took down state championship banners and the flag in the gym, got those cleaned. So, for 3 weeks, I'm really tickled where we're at.
Mhm.
I did want to mention, and this will be the last thing, is there anything pool board wise?
Meeting tomorrow?
The
Okay.
roof, you got a new roof.
Yeah, new roof, yeah, that's right.
Speaking of roofs, we're also doing a roofing project down here above the weight room and band room this summer.
Right, yeah.
So we can't forget
Yes.
that as well. You know, you get building projects done, you think,
Yeah.
Good,
every
but
summer,
no.
I've said this for 13
Maintenance.
years, I'm amazed how much gets done in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say this too, with having most of our floors epoxy based now, how much time that saves.
Yes.
And
Yes.
product.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We've had 2 schools come in the last couple months looking at our epoxy floor because they're looking
Oh,
at
right.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
good.
So L&M was just up here this last week.
Something the two pool board members that you might wanna make sure gets mentioned at your meeting tomorrow night is that equipment breakdown insurance that we talked about at our previous meeting that we're doing. And we had some training on that this week, and I've given Ryan all that information, so that the pool, because, the building and the pool's covered under the school, that will be part of that. So there are numerous things at the pool that will be covered under the equipment breakdown now. So that's gonna be something new, and that premium for that comes out of our management fund. So that should potentially save the pool some money.
Good.
2 last things I want to mention. Number 1, can we meet from 5 to 7 on Thursday the 21st, 5 o'clock to have a special meeting to approve the bills? And then just have our work session to kind of wrap up the year, if that works. I know people have places to go, but I'll make sure we're done by 7. Does that work for the board?
Mhm.
I believe so.
And our regular meeting in July is on the 11th at 5:30. But the last thing I want to share, and I'm just over the top giddy on this, the Townsend Foundation Board recently met with the administration, and you know, we got input from our staff and whatnot, but they allocated a little over $300,000 to the school, which is just phenomenal. Phenomenal. One of those allocations is for turf playground.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yay.
They're gonna be so excited.
Yay. So we're getting bids
That
on a
is
turf,
So nice.
turfed area back behind the school that we've talked about. So, all I can say is, what a blessing to have an individual like
Yeah.
Herb Townsend that has given so much to the community and to the school. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it is.
it's just, it really makes Wilton special. It's just, and I will go over at the work session to break down different things. But that was the big chunk. Our original bid was around $170,000 for that turf playground.
Right, yeah.
So, if for some crazy reason it comes a little bit over now, we'll have to just pay for it out of our, other funding, but
Which
that's what
day?
the bid, that was the general bid we received, last fall. But everything else in terms of like Leader in Me, some of our AIW work, national conference again, they donated $20,000, so each teacher gets $300 to spend in the classroom. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, just couldn't say enough, thank you. Townsend Foundation and those serving there. But otherwise, that's all I have.
All right, wonderful. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Good night.